My name is Jennifer Sullivan. I'm 36 years old. And until last Thursday, I was the lead network security specialist at Vertex Technologies, a cybersecurity firm in Boston that protects some of the largest healthcare networks on the East Coast. I'd been with Vertex for 8 years. 8 years of building their security infrastructure from nothing but lines of code and late nights. I wasn't just an employee with keycard access. I was the backbone of their entire security protocol. The person they called when ransomware threatened a hospital's patient records at 3 a.m. The person who designed the authentication system that became their selling point to cautious healthcare administrators. The person who trained every new hire on security compliance while the company grew from 12 people in a cramped office to over 100 employees occupying 3 floors of prime downtown real estate. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Last Thursday morning, I walked into the glass-walled meeting room expecting a routine update on our upcoming system migration. Instead, I found Brian Coleman, the CEO's son who'd joined the company exactly 9 days earlier, sitting beside Lisa from HR, a woman I'd only exchanged pleasantries with in the break room. The leather portfolio on the table between them was closed. That was my first clue. "Jennifer," Brian said, straightening his tie, a gesture that felt rehearsed. "Thanks for being prompt." I settled into the chair across from them, noticing how Brian's eyes flickered to Lisa before returning to me. The room felt different, colder somehow, despite the thermostat reading the same 72 degrees it always did. "We've been reviewing the organizational structure," Brian began, his voice carrying the artificial confidence of someone reciting memorized lines. "As the new director of IT operations, I've identified several redundancies in our security division. We need to streamline operations to remain competitive." I almost laughed. I'd spent the last 3 years building a security system so comprehensive that Meridian Healthcare, a network of 12 hospitals, trusted us with their patient data. A system so robust that we'd successfully repelled 2 major ransomware attempts that had crippled our competitors. "The board has approved a restructuring," Brian continued, sliding the portfolio toward me. "Your position is being consolidated with our general IT department. We need a more modern approach, less siloed expertise." Lisa spoke for the first time, her voice gentle but hollow. "Your contributions have been valuable, Jennifer, but we're moving in a different direction. More agile, more integrated." I opened the portfolio slowly. Termination agreement, severance package, non-disclosure forms, non-compete clause, exit interview schedule, today, within the hour. "Effective immediately," Brian added, as if I couldn't read the bolded words on the page in front of me. I looked up, meeting Brian's gaze directly. "The system migration is scheduled for Monday." He nodded dismissively. "David will handle it. He's been fully briefed." David Garcia had been with the company for 4 months. He was competent with general network administration, but he'd never touched the proprietary security protocols I'd developed. He didn't have access to the fail-safe measures built into the system. He didn't know about the redundancies I'd created that weren't documented in any official guide. I closed the portfolio carefully, my fingers trailing along its edge. "I understand," I said, my voice steady. I extended my hand across the table. "I wish you luck with the migration." Brian seemed relieved as he shook my hand, his grip too firm, as if strength could compensate for inexperience. Lisa looked surprised. Perhaps she'd expected tears or anger or desperate negotiation. But I wasn't any of those things. Because in that moment, what washed over me wasn't rage or hurt or even shock. It was something clearer, colder, and somehow liberating. It was the absolute certainty that Brian Coleman had just made the most expensive mistake of his short career. He didn't know what Monday would bring, but I did. I collected my personal belongings under Lisa's watchful eye. Company policy for terminated security personnel, my desk plant, a framed photo of my niece, the collection of network security books I'd purchased with my own money, my favorite coffee mug. The contents of my life at Vertex fit into a single cardboard box. 8 years reduced to objects that could be carried in one trip to the elevator. As I packed, Aisha Washington, our senior developer, stopped by my cubicle. Her eyes widened at the sight of the box. "Spring cleaning?" she asked, her voice light but her expression concerned. "Something like that," I replied with a small smile. "Just tidying up." I couldn't tell her the truth, not with Lisa hovering nearby, not with the NDA freshly signed. But Aisha was smart. The box told her everything she needed to know. "Let's grab coffee soon," she said, her tone deliberately casual. "This weekend, maybe?" "I'd like that," I replied. I took one last look at my workspace. The monitor still displayed the security protocol flowchart I'd been refining for Monday's migration, a system that would connect all of Meridian Healthcare's networks to our new platform. The platform that only I fully understood. The platform with safeguards only I could implement correctly. I walked out without fanfare. No goodbye email, no team announcement, just the quiet click of the security door locking behind me, a door secured by a system I had designed. At home that evening, I poured a glass of wine and opened my personal laptop. I reviewed the termination agreement carefully. The non-compete clause existed, but it was remarkably narrow, applicable only if I worked directly for a competing security firm within 6 months. Nothing about independent consultation. Nothing about working directly for clients. I pulled up my personal cloud storage. For years, I'd kept detailed notes on my security implementations. Not company documents, just my own process notes. Ideas sketched out on weekends. Problems solved during late-night inspiration. Information that was distinctly mine, created on my time with my resources. Information that existed nowhere in Vertex's documentation because I had always been there to provide it. Then I checked my personal email. There it was, a message from Dr. Chen at Meridian Healthcare sent just hours ago. "Jennifer, looking forward to Monday's migration. I've scheduled our IT team for the transition at 6 a.m. sharp. Please confirm all systems are ready on your end." I didn't reply. Not yet. I had other things to consider first. I slept better that night than I had in months. No 2 a.m. alerts about suspicious network activity. No early morning calls from anxious clients. Just the strange, unfamiliar quiet of unemployment. I woke up naturally at 7:23 a.m., almost 3 hours later than my usual alarm. My apartment felt different in the morning light, not smaller or emptier, but full of possibilities I hadn't noticed before. I made coffee slowly, savoring the process instead of gulping it down while scanning security logs. I checked my phone. 3 LinkedIn messages from colleagues, 2 texts from Aisha, "What happened?" and "Call me ASAP," and a missed call from Dr. Chen at Meridian. I sat at my kitchen table with my notebook, the one where I'd documented every client's security configuration, every network quirk, every custom protocol that made their systems work seamlessly with ours. Information that existed nowhere in Vertex's knowledge base because I'd carried it all in my head. For 8 years, I hadn't just secured networks. I'd built relationships. I knew which hospital administrators needed extra reassurance after security updates. I knew which IT directors preferred technical details and which ones wanted simplified explanations. I knew the history of every breach attempt and how we'd countered it. I wasn't just a security specialist. I was the institutional memory of Vertex's most critical function. At 10 a.m., I called Dr. Chen. Not the office line, not the IT department. I called his direct number, the one he'd given me 3 years ago during a ransomware crisis that we'd navigated together over a sleepless weekend. "Jennifer," he answered, relief evident in his voice. "I've been trying to reach you about Monday's migration." There it was, the opening. About that, I said calmly. As of yesterday, I'm no longer with Vertex Technologies. Silence stretched between us. That's unexpected, he finally replied.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Especially with the migration scheduled. I was informed that my position has been consolidated. The company is restructuring. Who's handling our migration now? The concern in his voice was unmistakable. I believe David Garcia will be overseeing it, I said neutrally. I'm sure Vertex will be in touch about any changes to the schedule. Jennifer, Dr. Chen's voice lowered, our entire network, patient, records, billing systems, diagnostic equipment, everything depends on this migration going smoothly. You're the only one who understands our security configuration completely. I know, I said quietly. I wanted you to hear about the change. From me directly. Professional courtesy. Another silence, this one calculated. Are you staying in the industry? He finally asked. Yes, I replied without hesitation. I'm evaluating my options. I'd like to speak with you, he said. Not about Vertex, but about Meridian security needs moving forward. Are you free today? A smile formed slowly. I am. We met at Beacon Hill Brews, a quiet coffee shop far enough from Vertex's offices to avoid accidental encounters with former colleagues. Dr. Chen was already there when I arrived, 2 cups of coffee on the table and a tablet displaying what looked like budget spreadsheets. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. Our IT department has been pushing to bring security management in-house for over a year, he said. The only reason we stayed with Vertex was because of you. Your system design, your availability, your understanding of healthcare's unique challenges. I nodded, warming my hands around the coffee cup. Healthcare security is specialized. It's not just about protecting data. It's about ensuring systems remain functional. A locked-down server doesn't help if doctors can't access patient records during an emergency. Exactly, Dr. Chen agreed, which is why I want to discuss bringing you on as a direct consultant to Meridian. The words hung in the air between us, direct consultant. For 8 years, I'd functioned as an independent expert under Vertex's banner. I'd built systems, solved problems, and maintained relationships that had nothing to do with the company's branding and everything to do with my expertise. If I were to consider independent consulting, I said carefully, what would that engagement look like for Meridian? Dr. Chen slid his tablet toward me. On the screen was a draft budget with a line item labeled Information Security Consultation, with a figure nearly double my Vertex salary. We need someone who can first ensure this migration doesn't collapse our systems, and then help us build our internal security team the right way, he said. I've already spoken with our CEO. We're prepared to offer a 1-year contract to start, with the option to extend. I studied the numbers carefully, taking my time before responding. This wasn't just a job offer. This was an opportunity to redefine my relationship with the work I'd been doing, to step out from behind a corporate logo and stand firmly in my own expertise. I'd need access to your system architecture immediately, I said, preferably today. If Monday's migration goes forward as planned without proper security protocols, the results could be catastrophic. Dr. Chen nodded, already typing an email on his phone. I'll have our team create credentials for you right away. You'll have full administrative access by this afternoon. And my contract terms? I asked, feeling a new kind of confidence, the kind that comes from being valued explicitly rather than taken for granted. I'll have legal draft something today. We can finalize it tomorrow. He paused, looking at me directly. Jennifer, I can't overstate how critical this is for us. 12 hospitals, thousands of patients. We need this to work. I understand the stakes, I assured him. And I did. Better than anyone at Vertex. Certainly better than Brian Coleman with his 9 days of industry experience. As we finished our coffee, Dr. Chen asked the question I'd been anticipating. Do you think Vertex realized what they were losing when they let you go? I considered this for a moment. No, I replied honestly. I don't think they understood what they were dismantling, but they will. By Monday afternoon, they'll understand perfectly. Back at my apartment, I set up my home office properly for the first time since I'd moved in 3 years ago. I'd always worked such long hours at Vertex that my home workspace had been little more than a desk with a laptop. Now I arranged my monitors for optimal workflow, connected to Meridian's network using the credentials Dr. Chen had provided, and began methodically reviewing their current security configuration. It was just as I remembered, because I had designed it. Every authentication protocol, every data encryption standard, every network segmentation decision reflected my security philosophy. The migration to the new platform would require careful reconfiguration of these elements, something David Garcia wouldn't know how to implement properly. Not because he wasn't capable, but because he didn't have the context, the why behind each design choice. My phone buzzed with a text from Aisha. Heard anything about Monday's migration? David's been looking stressed all day. I replied carefully, can't discuss, but coffee tomorrow at 9? Beacon Hill Brews? Her response was immediate. I'll be there. That evening, I received an email from Meridian's legal department with a draft consulting contract. The terms were generous, more than fair. I made a few small amendments, noting my independent contractor status and clarifying the scope of work, then returned it before midnight. At 8:15 a.m. the next morning, a priority email from Dr. Chen arrived with the executed contract and a secure link to upload my invoice information to Meridian's payment system. Just like that, I was no longer unemployed. I was an independent security consultant with my first major client. Aisha arrived at the coffee shop precisely at 9, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. She'd always been punctual, one of many qualities that had made working with her so productive. They're not telling us anything, she said without preamble, sliding into the chair across from me. David's been locked in meetings with Brian since yesterday afternoon. The migration team hasn't received updated protocols. Everyone's asking where you are, and all we've been told is that you're no longer with the company. I took a sip of my coffee, organizing my thoughts. I was terminated, effective immediately. Brian decided my position was redundant and could be folded into general IT operations. Aisha stared at me, her coffee forgotten. That's insane. You designed the entire security infrastructure. You're the only one who fully understands the Meridian integration. Apparently, that wasn't considered relevant to the decision. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Jennifer, this isn't just about you. There's more happening. Yesterday, I overheard Robert and Brian arguing in Robert's office. Something about investor pressure and needing to show streamlined operations before the end of the quarter. The pieces clicked into place. Vertex had been courting acquisition for months. Rumors of talks with Cyberfront Solutions, a larger security firm, had circulated among senior staff. They needed to show efficient operations and reduced overhead to make the numbers attractive. They're cutting costs to pretty up the balance sheet, I said, understanding now. Sacrificing institutional knowledge for short-term financial appearances. Aisha nodded grimly. They've already identified 3 more redundancies in the development team. My position is on the list. I found the spreadsheet open on Brian's laptop during yesterday's emergency meeting. I hadn't planned to discuss my new arrangement with Aisha yet, but the situation had changed. I've accepted a position as Meridian Healthcare's security consultant, I told her. Direct contract, independent status. They need someone who actually understands their systems. Her eyes widened, then narrowed thoughtfully. Smart move. Very smart. Meridian will need development support too, I added carefully. Someone who understands how security integrates with their applications. Someone who can build custom solutions for healthcare-specific challenges. A slow smile spread across Aisha's face. Are you offering me a job, Jennifer? Not yet, I said honestly, but I'm suggesting you update your resume, and maybe don't. Work too hard fixing whatever is about to go wrong on Monday. We finished our coffee with a new understanding between us. Aisha had been more than a colleague. She had been an ally in countless technical battles, often staying late to help me troubleshoot security issues that affected her development work. She deserved better than a line item on Brian Coleman's redundancy spreadsheet. As we parted outside the coffee shop, Aisha squeezed my arm. For what it's worth, the office feels wrong without you there, like the foundation has shifted. That was exactly what had happened, though Vertex hadn't realized it yet. The foundation had indeed shifted, and Monday would reveal just how unstable their structure had become. I spent Saturday methodically preparing for two possibilities. First, I created a detailed implementation plan for Meridian's migration that would properly maintain all security protocols through the transition. Second, I drafted a recovery strategy for when, not if, Vertex's attempt failed. Both documents were careful, thorough, and professional. This wasn't about sabotage. It was about competence. On Sunday evening, my phone began lighting up with messages, first from Aisha. Emergency meeting called for 7 a.m. tomorrow. David looks like he hasn't slept in days. Brian keeps asking questions about authentication protocols that make no sense. Then, surprisingly, from Mark Wilson at Boston General Hospital, another Vertex client. Heard you're no longer with Vertex. Concerned about our security configurations. Can we talk tomorrow? The word was spreading through professional networks, faster than I'd anticipated. Healthcare IT was a small community, particularly in Boston. People talked. Questions were being asked. At 9:37 p.m., a call from Vertex's main number appeared on my phone. I let it go to voicemail. Jennifer, this is David Garcia. I'm reviewing the migration protocols for Meridian, and I'm having trouble locating some documentation about their custom authentication requirements. If you could give me a call back tonight, I'd really appreciate it. I didn't call back. Not out of spite, but because I no longer worked for Vertex. Their documentation problems weren't my responsibility anymore. At 10:52 p.m., another call, this time from Brian Coleman's direct line. Again, to voicemail. Jennifer, this is Brian Coleman. There seem to be some gaps in our technical documentation for tomorrow's migration. I understand the circumstances of your departure might have been abrupt, but I hope we can maintain professional courtesy. If you could call me back tonight, we can discuss a consulting arrangement for tomorrow's transition. Please call me as soon as possible. Professional courtesy. The same courtesy that had been extended to me with a leather portfolio and 30 minutes to clear my desk. I turned my phone to silent and went to bed. I slept better than I had in years. Monday morning, I woke at 5 a.m., made coffee, and set up my workspace for what would undoubtedly be an interesting day. I'd already provided Meridian with my security protocol recommendations and given them access to the custom tools I'd developed for migration verification. Now I just had to wait. At 6:12 a.m., my phone lit up with a call from Dr. Chen. We're receiving error messages from Vertex's platform, he said without preamble. Authentication failures across all connection points. Their team says it's a minor configuration issue that should be resolved shortly. It's not minor, I replied calmly. They're trying to implement the migration without properly configuring the tiered security protocols. The system is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, preventing unauthorized architecture changes. How long before it's fixed? If they figure out the correct implementation? Hours. If they try to bypass the security measures? They might succeed temporarily, but secondary safeguards will trigger and lock down the entire system. Our hospitals can't wait hours, Dr. Chen said, tension evident in his voice. We have surgeries scheduled, patients being admitted, medications being administered. We need our systems operational. I understand, I assured him. That's why I prepared a contingency. Check your email. I've sent instructions for activating the backup connection protocol I built into your system last year. It will bypass the Vertex platform entirely and restore your operations through a secure alternative. Channel. There was a pause, then the sound of rapid typing. I see it, he said, implementing now. 20 minutes later, Meridian's systems were fully operational again, running through the secure fallback channel I'd designed, but that Vertex had deemed unnecessarily redundant during last year's budget review. I'd built it anyway, knowing that healthcare systems needed fail-safe options more than they needed cost savings. As I monitored Meridian's network recovery, messages continued flooding in. Aisha reported chaos at Vertex headquarters. Developers called in from weekend plans, Brian shouting about documentation failures, Robert Coleman himself demanding answers about why their biggest client systems were offline. At 8:45 a.m., Mark Wilson from Boston General called again. Jennifer, our connection to Vertex's platform just went down. They're saying it's related to the Meridian migration and should be resolved soon. We have patients in every department who need care now. Do you have any suggestions? I do, I said, already opening a new document to outline the bypass. Procedure for their specific configuration. I'm sending you instructions for an emergency alternative pathway. It's already built into your system. It just needs to be activated. By 10:30 a.m., 3 more healthcare networks, all Vertex clients, had contacted me directly. By noon, all of them were running on backup channels I had designed, independent of Vertex's failing migration attempt. At 1:17 p.m., my phone displayed a name I hadn't expected, Robert Coleman. I answered, keeping my tone neutral. Hello, Mr. Coleman. Jennifer, he said, his voice missing the confident authority it usually carried. We have a situation here that I think you might be able to help us resolve. I'm listening. The migration has encountered some complications. David believes there are security protocols that aren't fully documented in our system. We thought that the transition would be straightforward. Security isn't straightforward, Mr. Coleman, I replied evenly. Especially in healthcare environments where lives depend on both system accessibility and data protection. That's why I designed custom protocols for each client, with specialized authentication requirements and fallback measures. A pause. Yes, well, we're discovering that now. Jennifer, we'd like to bring you in as a consultant to help resolve this situation. Name your terms. I had expected this call, just not so soon. Part of me, a small human part, felt a flicker of satisfaction. But mostly, I felt a calm certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. I'm afraid I can't help you directly, Mr. Coleman. I've already accepted a position as Meridian Healthcare's security consultant. Their systems are currently operational, through alternative channels I designed, as are Boston General's, Mount Auburn's, and Riverside Medical Centers. Another longer pause. I see, he finally said, his voice tight. May I ask how this happened so quickly? They valued what Vertex didn't recognize, I said simply. Security isn't just code or configuration files. It's understanding why systems are designed the way they are, the context, the history, the reasoning behind each decision. That knowledge walked out the door when Brian handed me my termination papers. Jennifer, Robert's voice softened. Let's discuss this. There must be a way forward that works for everyone. What if we offered you a director position? Full autonomy over security operations, increased compensation, a seat at the leadership table. The offer might have tempted me a week ago, but not anymore. Mr. Coleman, I appreciate the offer, but my path is already set. I'm building my own security consultancy focused exclusively on healthcare networks. Several of your former clients have already expressed interest in direct contracts. A sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. That would violate your non-compete agreement. Actually, it doesn't. The termination agreement specifically limits the non-compete. Clause to employment with direct competitors. Independent consultation for end clients isn't covered. Your legal team should have caught that before Brian signed off on my termination. Silence stretched between us, heavy with realization. Is there anything you can do to help us restore service to our clients today? He finally asked, his voice diminished. I've already done it, I replied. I've helped your clients restore their operations through backup channels I designed. They're functional and secure. What happens between them and Vertex going forward is a business decision. That's out of my hands. After ending the call, I took a moment to absorb what had just happened. I hadn't sought revenge. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I had simply moved forward, taking my expertise with me and using it to help the organizations that truly needed it. My phone buzzed with a text from Aisha. Just submitted my resignation. 2 weeks' notice. Reception's a mess with calls from angry clients. Brian's been called to Robert's office 4 times today. When can I start with you? I smiled. Let's talk tomorrow about making you my first hire. By Tuesday afternoon, the full impact of Migration Monday, as it was already being called in Boston healthcare circles, was becoming clear. Vertex had managed to restore basic functionality to their platform, but client trust had been severely damaged. 3 more hospitals had reached out to me directly, bypassing Vertex entirely. I scheduled a meeting with Aisha for Wednesday morning at my apartment, which was temporarily serving as my office until I could secure a proper workspace. She arrived with 2 coffees and a determined expression. I've been thinking about our structure, she said, setting her bag down and pulling out her laptop. If we're going to build a healthcare-focused security consultancy, we need to be organized differently than Vertex. More collaborative, less siloed. I smiled at her use of we and our. Aisha had always been forward-thinking, able to see beyond immediate technical challenges to broader structural issues. I agree, I said, opening my own laptop to show her the framework I'd been developing. I'm thinking about a hub-and-spoke model, core security architecture at the center, with specialized teams focused on different healthcare domains, patient records, clinical systems, research data, billing networks. Aisha nodded enthusiastically. Yes, and we could implement cross-training so no single person becomes an indispensable knowledge silo, like you were at Vertex. Exactly. Documentation needs to be comprehensive but accessible. Context is just as important as code. We spent the morning mapping out what would become Sullivan Security Solutions, the name I'd registered the day after my termination. By lunchtime, we had a basic business plan, a staffing outline, and a list of potential clients. We should reach out to Stephanie Kim, Aisha suggested as we ordered delivery from the Thai place around the corner. She left Vertex last year, but she was brilliant with healthcare compliance frameworks. She'd be perfect to lead our regulatory. Good idea. Do you have her contact information? Aisha grinned. Already texted her this morning. She's interested. That afternoon, Dr. Chen called with news. Meridian's board met this morning. We've unanimously decided to terminate our contract with Vertex and move forward with you as our primary security provider. I'll have legal draw up a formal agreement, but I wanted you to know immediately so you can prepare. Thank you for your confidence, Dr. Chen. We'll be ready. We? Already building a team, I see. Yes, I replied, looking across the table at Aisha, who was sketching a network architecture diagram on my whiteboard, the best one in the industry. By Friday, I had secured a modest office space in Cambridge, a former tech startup's headquarters, with an open floor plan, plenty of natural light, and most importantly, available immediately. The rent was reasonable, especially with Meridian's contract providing stable initial income. Aisha and I spent the weekend setting up the space, ordering equipment, and preparing for our first official week of business. On Sunday evening, as we arranged desks and configured the network, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Jennifer Sullivan," I answered, balancing the phone while untangling Ethernet cables. "Ms. Sullivan, this is Elizabeth Morgan, Chief Information Officer at New England Medical Group. We operate 6 hospitals across Massachusetts. I understand you're establishing a security consultancy specializing in healthcare networks." I straightened, setting the cables aside. "That's correct, Ms. Morgan. We're launching this week. I'd like to meet with you as soon as possible. We've been with Vertex for 3 years, but after what happened with Meridian's migration, and hearing about your role in resolving it, we're reevaluating our options." Another call like this had come yesterday from Lakeside Hospital Group. Word was spreading faster than I'd anticipated, creating opportunities I hadn't expected for weeks or months. "I'd be happy to meet Ms. Morgan. How about Tuesday morning? At your offices? That would give us a chance to better understand your specific network configuration." "Perfect. I'll have my assistant send calendar details. Looking forward to it, Ms. Sullivan." As I hung up, Aisha raised an eyebrow. "Another one?" "New England Medical Group, 6 hospitals." She whistled softly. "That's a major account. Brian must be having a complete meltdown by now." I hadn't given much thought to Brian Coleman's mental state. His poor judgment wasn't personal to me. It was simply a business mistake with predictable consequences. But I couldn't help wondering how Vertex was handling the rapidly unfolding crisis. Monday morning, exactly 1 week after the migration disaster, I walked into our new office space at 7:30 a.m., carrying a box of essentials: my laptop, reference books, and a small potted plant that had once sat on my desk at Vertex. Symbolic, perhaps, but it felt right to bring it into this new chapter. Aisha arrived at 8:15, followed shortly by Stephanie Kim, who had agreed to join us as our compliance director. By 9 a.m., we were gathered around the conference table for our first official team meeting. "Welcome to Sullivan Security Solutions," I began, feeling a strange mix of nervous energy and absolute certainty. 1 week ago, we didn't exist. Today, we have 3 confirmed clients, 2 promising meetings scheduled, and inquiries coming in daily. All because Brian Coleman made the worst decision of his career, Aisha said with a small smile. I shook my head. No. All because healthcare organizations value expertise and reliability over corporate restructuring and cost-cutting. Brian just created the opportunity for them to recognize that difference. We spent the morning dividing responsibilities, establishing workflows, and planning our approach to the New England Medical Group meeting. It wasn't glamorous work, spreadsheets, calendars, task assignments, but it felt honest. We were building something real, something based on authentic value rather than corporate appearances. At 11:23 a.m., my phone rang with Vertex's main number. I considered letting it go to voicemail, then decided against it. This was business, not personal. "Jennifer Sullivan," I answered. "Jennifer, it's David Garcia." His voice sounded strained, exhausted. "I'm calling to apologize, first of all. I had no idea how complex the security architecture was. I thought the documentation covered everything." Documentation. "Rarely does, David. That's not your fault." A heavy sigh. "I'm also calling because I'm thinking of making a change. Things are tense here. Brian's been moved to strategic initiatives, whatever that means. Robert's taken over daily operations again, but the atmosphere is toxic. I hadn't intended to recruit from Vertex, particularly not so soon, but David was talented, inexperienced in healthcare security, but a quick learner with solid technical fundamentals. "We should talk," I said carefully. "Not about Vertex's internal matters, but about your career goals. How about coffee later this week? I'd appreciate that. Thank you, Jennifer. As the day progressed, I received updates from Dr. Chen about Meridian systems, all running smoothly on the new security protocols I'd implemented over the weekend. Mark Wilson from Boston General called to confirm they were moving forward with a formal contract. Lakeside Hospital Group sent over an initial proposal for review. It was, by any measure, an extraordinary first day of business. Not because we'd accomplished anything remarkable yet, but because the foundation we were building felt solid in a way that Vertex's structure never had. At 5:45 p.m., as we were wrapping up for the day, a delivery arrived, a large arrangement of flowers with a card. Jennifer, congratulations on your new venture. Your expertise saved our hospitals from significant disruption last week. We look forward to a long and productive partnership. The Meridian Healthcare Leadership Team. I placed the flowers on the reception desk we hadn't yet staffed, a bright spot of color in our still sparse office. Nice touch, Stephanie commented. Better than the farewell party Vertex never gave you. I laughed. I don't think termination parties are standard practice, even in the best circumstances. Speaking of Vertex, Aisha said, checking her phone, have you seen their stock today? I hadn't been monitoring financial news. Building a business from scratch left little time for tracking market movements. Down 12% since the migration failure, she continued. And there are rumors that Cyberfront Solutions has pulled out of acquisition talks entirely. The acquisition, of course. That explained Brian's reckless restructuring. He'd been preparing the company for sale, trimming expenses to improve the balance sheet, regardless of the operational impacts. A common enough corporate strategy, but fatally flawed when applied to knowledge-based services like security. Their loss is our gain, Stephanie said, powering down her laptop. Ready to head out? First day drinks are on me. As we locked up the office and headed to a nearby restaurant, I found myself reflecting on the strange path that had led us here. Just 10 days ago, I'd walked into a glass-walled conference room expecting a routine meeting and had my professional life upended instead. Now, I was leading a rapidly growing security consultancy with former colleagues who shared my vision and values. Clients were calling us, not the other way around. We were building something meaningful, something that recognized the true value of expertise and institutional knowledge. All because Brian Coleman, in his first week as director of IT operations, had made a catastrophic misjudgment about what really mattered in security services. Over dinner, we toasted our new beginning and shared stories of our Vertex experiences, the good, the bad, and the occasionally absurd. There was no bitterness in our conversation, just the shared recognition that we'd found a better path forward. As we walked back to the subway station, Aisha asked the question that had probably been on all their minds. Did you know this would happen? When Brian fired you, did you know it would lead to this? I considered the question carefully. Not specifically, no. I knew the migration would fail without proper security implementation. I knew the clients would be affected. But I didn't anticipate how quickly they would reach out, or how ready they would be to make changes. So you didn't plan this as some elaborate revenge scheme? Stephanie asked with a small smile. No revenge, no scheme. Just confidence in the value of what I know and what I can build. Brian underestimated that value. The clients didn't. We parted ways at the station, agreeing to meet early the next morning to prepare for the New England Medical Group meeting. As I rode the train home, I scrolled through my emails one last time, confirming details, checking schedules, responding to inquiries. The work was familiar, but the context was entirely new. This was my company, my vision, my future. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Jennifer, this is Robert Coleman. I know it's late, but I'd appreciate a chance to speak with you privately. Not about returning to Vertex, but about finding a path forward that serves our mutual clients. Please call when convenient. I saved the number but didn't respond immediately. Whatever Robert wanted to discuss could wait until tomorrow. Tonight was for savoring the quiet satisfaction of knowing I was exactly where I needed to be, building something valuable, something lasting, something that recognized the true worth of expertise. As I reached my apartment, another text came. Through, this one from Dr. Chen. Board meeting concluded. Contract approved unanimously. Official announcement tomorrow. Thank you for your exceptional work during the crisis. Looking forward to our continued partnership. I smiled as I unlocked my door. Not a vindictive smile, not one of triumph over adversity, but the simple satisfaction of being valued for what I knew and what I could create. Brian Coleman had fired me on his first day as director of IT operations. He'd had no idea the system would crash on Monday. But more importantly, he'd had no idea what would rise from those ashes. Something stronger, more authentic, and infinitely more valuable than what he'd so casually discarded. And that, more than any temporary crisis or corporate reshuffling, was the true story of Sullivan Security Solutions' first day of business. Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after Migration Monday, I arrived at our new office in Cambridge at 7:15 a.m. The space wasn't fancy, just an open floor plan with exposed brick walls and large windows overlooking the Charles River. But it was ours. Sullivan Security Solutions was officially operational. I set my coffee on what would become my desk and took a moment to absorb the significance of the moment. 1 week ago, I'd been monitoring a cascading system failure from my apartment. Now I was standing in the headquarters of a company I'd built from the ground up, a company founded on genuine expertise rather than corporate hierarchies. My phone buzzed with a text from Aisha. On my way with breakfast, Stephanie about 20. Minutes behind me, David called. Wants to meet for lunch. David Garcia, Vertex's increasingly desperate network administrator. His voicemails had grown more frantic over the past week as client after client either activated their backup channels or initiated discussions about terminating their Vertex contracts entirely. I hadn't sought to poach Vertex employees, but I wouldn't turn away talent if it came looking for me. By 9 a.m., our small team had gathered for our first official strategy meeting. The whiteboard was covered with client names, system architectures, and implementation timelines. Meridian Healthcare had officially terminated their contract with Vertex yesterday afternoon, signing a comprehensive 1-year agreement with us. Instead, Boston General was finalizing similar paperwork. New England Medical Group had scheduled a full security assessment for Thursday. We need to start hiring immediately, Stephanie said, reviewing our project timeline. Even with the 3 of us working flat out, we can't handle this volume of client transitions. Agreed, I replied. Let's draft job descriptions today. I want to be selective, though. We're building for quality, not scale. Speaking of quality, Aisha interjected, have you seen the interview Robert Coleman gave to Boston Business Journal this morning? I hadn't. Building a company from scratch left little time for media monitoring. He's trying to spin the migration disaster as an unexpected technical challenge, claims Vertex is evolving its approach to client security and implementing more robust knowledge management systems. She read from her tablet with raised eyebrows, basically admitting they had no idea what they were doing when they fired you. I shrugged. Better late than never, I suppose. What about Brian? Not mentioned once in the entire article. Word is he's been reassigned to special projects, corporate speak for the professional penalty box. I felt no satisfaction at Brian's downfall. His poor judgment had created an opportunity for me, but his career trajectory wasn't my concern. My focus was on building something better than what I'd left behind. At 11:30 a.m., I met David for lunch at a small bistro halfway between our office and Vertex's headquarters. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, shirt slightly rumpled, the general appearance of someone who had been fighting a losing battle for days. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as we settled at a corner table. "I wasn't sure you would." "Why wouldn't I?" I asked. "We were colleagues for months." "This isn't personal, David." He nodded slowly. "That's what I've been trying to tell them, that this isn't about loyalty or competition. It's about expertise. They threw away something they didn't understand, and now they're surprised it's breaking." "What's the situation now?" I asked, genuinely curious about Vertex's response to the crisis. "Chaos," he replied simply. 4 major healthcare clients have either suspended services or terminated contracts entirely. Robert's taken over daily operations. Brian's been sidelined. They've hired an outside security consultant to review the entire architecture, but he keeps saying the same thing, that the system was well designed but requires contextual knowledge to maintain properly. "And that's why you wanted to meet?" David looked down at his water glass, then back up at me. "I want to join Sullivan." "Security. I know I'm not as experienced in healthcare security as you or Stephanie, but I'm a quick learner. And honestly, I'd rather be part of something authentic than watch Vertex try to rebuild what they deliberately dismantled." I hadn't come to lunch expecting to make a job offer, but David's directness deserved equal honesty. "We are hiring, but I need to be transparent. We're a startup with all the associated risks. No corner offices, no corporate perks, and everyone wears multiple hats." "That's exactly what I want," he said with unexpected conviction. "I don't need another rung on a corporate ladder. I need work that matters." By the time we finished lunch, we'd outlined a role for David, junior security architect with a focus on implementation and documentation. He'd give his notice at Vertex tomorrow and join us in 2 weeks. One more piece falling into place. Back at the office, I found Aisha deep in conversation with a visitor, a woman in her early 40s with a portfolio open on the conference table between them. "Jennifer, this is Elaine Winters," Aisha said as I approached. "Former head of cybersecurity at Lakeside Hospital Group. She heard about us through Dr. Chen at Meridian." "I resigned from Lakeside this morning," Elaine explained, extending her hand. "They outsourced our entire security division to a managed service provider with no healthcare experience. When I objected, I was told to adapt or move on. So I moved on." Another casualty of corporate cost-cutting, another expert whose value had been miscalculated. "What are you looking for now?" I asked, taking a seat across from her. "Honestly, a place where expertise matters. Where security isn't treated as an expense to be minimized, but as a critical function to be optimized." She gestured around our modest office. "From what I hear, that's exactly what you're building." By Wednesday afternoon, our team had grown to 5, with Elaine joining as our healthcare compliance specialist and an official offer extended to David. We'd scheduled interviews with 3 more potential team members for the following week. New England Medical Group had moved up their security assessment to Friday, citing urgent concerns about current provider stability. At 4:30 p.m., my phone rang with a number I recognized but hadn't expected to see, Robert Coleman. "Jennifer," he said when I answered, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "Thank you for taking my call. I was hoping we could meet in person to discuss a matter of mutual interest." "What did you have in mind, Mr. Coleman?" A slight pause. "Vertex is at a crossroads. The migration failure has exposed significant vulnerabilities in our operational structure. I'd like to discuss potential collaboration options, not employment, but perhaps a strategic partnership between our firms." "A partnership," I repeated, processing the unexpected suggestion. "Between Vertex Technologies and Sullivan Security Solutions." "Yes, your expertise combined with our market presence could be beneficial for all involved." I considered his proposal carefully. Not a vindictive rejection, not an immediate acceptance, but a measured business evaluation. "I'd be willing to discuss possibilities, Mr. Coleman. How about Friday afternoon?" "That would be acceptable. Our offices, or would you prefer neutral ground?" Let's meet at the Charles Hotel at 3 p.m. I'll reserve a meeting room. After ending the call, I sat at my desk, staring out at the river. A partnership with Vertex hadn't been part of my vision. My goal had been to build something separate, something better. But sometimes opportunities emerge from unexpected directions. Stephanie knocked gently on my office doorframe. "Everything okay? You look deep in thought." Robert Coleman just proposed a strategic partnership between Vertex and Sullivan. Her eyebrows shot up. "Well, that's surprising. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we need to approach this carefully. It could be a genuine opportunity, or it could be an attempt to reabsorb what they lost. Either way, I'll hear him out on Friday." Thursday brought a flurry of activity: client calls, system implementations, interview scheduling. We were growing faster than I'd anticipated, driven by the healthcare industry's urgent need for security expertise. By noon, I'd approved a new logo design, signed a contract with Mount Auburn Hospital, and confirmed 3 more client meetings for the following week. In the midst of this controlled chaos, a courier arrived with a package from Meridian Healthcare. Inside was a formal letter of commendation from their board of directors, thanking us for extraordinary service during a critical system transition and confirming their commitment to a long-term partnership. Attached to the letter was a newspaper clipping, a small article from the healthcare industry newsletter announcing Vertex Technologies' stock had fallen 18% since the migration failure, with analysts citing client confidence concerns and operational stability questions. I shared the letter with the team but discarded the clipping. Our success wasn't built on Vertex's struggles. It was built on recognizing and delivering what healthcare organizations truly needed: security, expertise that understood their unique challenges. Friday morning, I led our team through New England Medical Group's security assessment. Their network was complex: 6 hospitals with different legacy systems, multiple access points, varying compliance requirements. By noon, we'd identified 17 critical vulnerabilities, most stemming from their current provider's one-size-fits-all approach to healthcare security. "This is worse than we expected," Elizabeth Morgan, their CIO, admitted as we reviewed our findings. "How quickly could you implement a more secure architecture?" "We could begin immediately," I replied. "Full implementation would take approximately 3 weeks, but we'd prioritize critical vulnerabilities first." She nodded decisively. "Draft a proposal. I'll present it to the board on Monday, but I can tell you now, they'll approve it. We can't afford these kinds of security gaps." Another client secured, another validation of our approach. As I left their offices, I realized I had just enough time to return to Cambridge, change, and make it to my meeting with Robert Coleman. I arrived at the Charles Hotel at 2:55 p.m., wearing the same suit I'd worn the day Brian fired me. A small, private bit of symmetry. The meeting room I'd reserved was small but elegant, with windows overlooking the courtyard. Robert arrived precisely at 3 p.m., looking noticeably different than he had 2 weeks ago. Less polished, more human. The crisis had taken its toll. "Jennifer," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for meeting with me." "Of course," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from mine. "You mentioned a potential partnership." He nodded, placing a thin folder on the table between us. "Before we discuss that, I want to acknowledge something. The decision to terminate your position was a serious error in judgment. Mine as much as Brian's. I allowed short-term financial considerations to override operational wisdom. That mistake has cost Vertex dearly." The admission wasn't what I'd expected. Corporate leaders rarely acknowledge failures so directly. "I appreciate your candor, Mr. Coleman," I said carefully. "But the past isn't my primary concern. I'm focused on building Sullivan security solutions." "And you're doing so impressively," he replied. "In less than 2 weeks, you've secured contracts with 4 major healthcare networks, all former Vertex clients. Your team is growing daily. The industry is taking notice." I waited, sensing there was more to this meeting than professional compliments. Robert opened the folder, revealing what appeared to be financial projections. Vertex Technologies is at a crossroads. The migration failure exposed fundamental flaws in our operational model. Our planned acquisition by Cyberfront Solutions has been indefinitely postponed. Several major clients have terminated their contracts. Our stock has fallen nearly 20%. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, Vertex employed good people who didn't deserve uncertainty because of leadership mistakes. I'm not here seeking sympathy, he continued. I'm here to propose a solution that could benefit both our companies. He slid the folder toward me. I'd like to discuss Vertex acquiring Sullivan Security Solutions. The proposal caught me completely off guard. Not a partnership, but an acquisition of my 2-week-old company by the very firm that had dismissed my value so carelessly. That's unexpected, I managed, reviewing the numbers in the folder. The offer was substantial, far more than Sullivan's current valuation could justify. Vertex needs to rebuild client trust, Robert explained. We need to demonstrate a genuine commitment to security expertise. Acquiring Sullivan, with you as the new executive director of security operations, would send that message clearly. You'd have full autonomy, increased resources, and a significant equity stake. I closed the folder slowly, gathering my thoughts. Mr. Coleman, I'm flattered by the offer, but I need to be direct. Sullivan Security Solutions doesn't exist because I wanted a better title or more money at Vertex. It exists because I saw a fundamentally different way to approach healthcare security, one built on expertise, context, and continuity rather than corporate efficiency metrics. I understand that, he insisted. That's exactly why I'm making this offer. Vertex needs that approach. We need to reorient our entire security division around the principles you're implementing at Sullivan. And Brian? I asked. Where does he factor into this reorganization? Robert's expression tightened slightly. Brian has been reassigned to our international business development team. He'll be relocating to our London office next month. Exiled to another continent, corporate, punishment for a costly mistake. I felt no satisfaction in the news, only a vague sadness at the waste of potential. I need time to consider this, I said finally, and I would need to discuss it with my team. They left Vertex or turned down other opportunities to join Sullivan. Their perspectives matter in this decision. Of course, Robert agreed. Take whatever time you need. The offer will remain open. As he left, I remained in the meeting room, staring at the folder. The financial terms were exceptional, life-changing money, frankly. The position would give me exactly the authority and resources I'd lacked at Vertex. On paper, it was everything I might have wanted 2 weeks ago. But something felt wrong. Not vindictive, not angry, just misaligned with the future I'd begun to envision. I returned to our Cambridge office to find the team still there, despite it being nearly 6 p.m. on a Friday. They were gathered around Aisha's computer, reviewing security protocols for Monday's implementation at New England Medical Group. How did the meeting go? Stephanie asked, noticing the folder in my hand. Interesting, I replied. Not at all. What I expected. Robert wants to acquire Sullivan Security Solutions. The offer is substantial. A moment of stunned silence. Then everyone began speaking at once. I raised a hand, quieting the chorus of questions. I haven't made any decisions, I assured them, and I won't without consulting all of you. This affects everyone in this room. Would we all stay together? Elaine asked. As a team? That's the proposal. Sullivan would become Vertex's specialized healthcare security division, with all of us maintaining our current roles. I would become executive director of security operations. Back where you started, but with a better title, Aisha observed, her expression unreadable. Not exactly where I started, I corrected, with significantly more authority, resources, and compensation. David, who had only officially accepted our offer yesterday, looked concerned. What happens to Vertex's current security team? They would be integrated into our division, with us leading the restructuring. The questions continued, about autonomy, about culture, about vision. Good questions, important questions that reflected what mattered to this team beyond titles and salaries. As the discussion wound down, I made a decision. Let's take the weekend to think about this, I suggested. We'll meet Monday morning to discuss further. This isn't just my decision. It affects all of us. As everyone gathered their things to leave, Stephanie hung back. What are you thinking, Jennifer? Really? I sighed, looking around the modest office we'd created from nothing. I'm thinking that 2 weeks ago, this offer would have seemed like perfect vindication. Now it feels, I don't know, like a step backward somehow. She nodded, understanding. Because you've discovered something better than vindication. Which is? The freedom to build something that truly reflects your values. Something that can't be taken away with a folder across a conference table. She squeezed my shoulder gently. Just something to consider over the weekend. I spent Saturday reviewing Robert's proposal in detail, making notes, weighing options. The financial security was tempting. The resources would allow us to grow faster, help more healthcare organizations. The recognition, becoming an executive director at the company that had dismissed me, carried a certain poetic justice. But Stephanie's words kept echoing, the freedom to build something that reflects your values, something that can't be taken away. Sunday morning, I went for a long run along the Charles River, letting the rhythm of my footsteps clear my mind. By the time I returned home, I knew my answer and the reasoning behind it. Monday morning, I arrived at the office early, prepared for our team discussion. Everyone filtered in by 8:30, coffee in hand, expressions curious but composed. Before we discussed the Vertex offer as a group, I began. I want to share my thinking process. When I started Sullivan Security Solutions, it wasn't about competing with Vertex or proving them wrong. It was about building something I believed in. Security services that truly understood healthcare's unique challenges. I looked around the room, making eye contact with each team member. In just 2 weeks, we've demonstrated that there's a real need for our approach. We've secured major clients, assembled an incredible team, and established a foundation for something meaningful. And the Vertex offer, Aisha prompted. It's generous, I acknowledged. And in many ways, it validates everything we've built. But it also asks us to fold that vision back into a corporate structure that didn't value it in the first place. Nods around the table. They understood. My recommendation is that we decline the acquisition offer, but propose an alternative. A limited strategic partnership where Sullivan remains independent but collaborates with Vertex on certain projects where our expertise complements their resources. We maintain our identity, our approach, and our autonomy while creating a path forward that could benefit both companies. The discussion that followed was thoughtful, detailed, and remarkably unified. By 10 a.m., we had unanimously decided to decline the acquisition, but draft a partnership proposal that preserved our independence while opening doors for collaboration. I called Robert at 10:30 a.m. to deliver our decision. I appreciate the careful consideration, he said after I explained our reasoning. The partnership proposal is unexpected, but potentially valuable. Would you be willing to present it to our executive team next week? Certainly, I agreed. We'll send over a draft framework today. Jennifer, Robert added before ending the call. For what it's worth, I respect your decision. Building something from the ground up takes courage. Declining an acquisition of this size takes even more. After the call, I joined the team in the conference room where they were already mapping out the New England Medical Group implementation. The energy was palpable, focused, collaborative, purposeful. This was what we were building, what we had chosen to preserve. 6 months later, Sullivan Security Solutions had grown to 23 employees, serving 15 major healthcare networks across New England. Our partnership with Vertex had evolved into a productive collaboration model where we provided specialized healthcare security expertise while they contributed technical resources and infrastructure. Brian Coleman had indeed been relocated to London, where he was reportedly doing well in a role better suited to his skills. David Garcia had become our implementation team lead, bringing 3 more talented engineers from Vertex with him. Stephanie had built an industry-leading compliance framework specifically for healthcare environments. Aisha had developed custom security tools that were now being licensed to other firms. And I had found something I never expected when I walked out of Vertex with that cardboard box of personal belongings. Not just professional success or financial security, but a profound sense of building something authentic, something aligned with my values. Something that couldn't be taken away with a leather portfolio and 30 minutes to clear my desk. 1 year to the day after Migration Monday, I was invited to deliver the keynote address at the National Healthcare Cybersecurity Conference. As I stood at the podium looking out at hundreds of IT professionals, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me there. The most valuable security system in any organization isn't a firewall or an authentication protocol, I told the audience. It's the collective knowledge, experience, and context of your team. When you recognize and value that human element, when you understand that documentation can never fully capture the why behind technical decisions, you build resilience that no restructuring can dismantle. After my talk, a young woman approached me, her expression a mixture of admiration and uncertainty. "They just eliminated my entire department," she said quietly. "Called it operational streamlining. I designed their entire network architecture and now I'm packaging up my desk decorations." I handed her my card. "Call me Monday," I said. "Your expertise matters, whether they recognize it or not." That evening, back in my office, now in a larger space overlooking the Boston skyline, I found a small package on my desk. Inside was a framed note from our team. "The best security doesn't prevent access. It ensures the right people have the right access for the right reasons. Thank you for building a company that understands the difference." I placed the frame on my desk, smiling at the journey it represented. Brian Coleman had fired me on his first day as director of IT operations. He'd had no idea the system would crash on Monday. But more importantly, he'd had no idea what that crash would create. Not just a new company, but a new model for how expertise should be valued in an industry where lives literally depend on getting it right. Sometimes the greatest opportunities emerge from the most painful dismissals. Sometimes being undervalued is the first step toward building something truly valuable. And sometimes the best revenge isn't proving someone wrong. It's proving yourself right in ways they never imagined possible. "There's more," Robert continued. "The board has authorized me to approach Sullivan about potentially acquiring some of our healthcare client contracts outright. Ones where the clients have expressed a strong preference for your specialized approach, but haven't yet terminated their Vertex agreements. Rather than fighting a losing battle to retain them, we'd prefer to negotiate a structured transition that benefits all parties." This was unexpected. Vertex voluntarily offering to transfer clients to Sullivan rather than struggling to retain them against growing dissatisfaction. "That's an interesting proposition," I replied carefully. "Which clients are we discussing?" "Primarily Northeast Regional Medical Center and Bayside Hospital Group. Both have explicitly mentioned Sullivan in recent communications about their security concerns. They've heard about your work at Meridian and Boston General. We'd rather facilitate a smooth transition than have them terminate abruptly as others have done." "I'd be open to discussing terms," I agreed. "But I want to be transparent. Our capacity is growing rapidly but still limited. We're prioritizing quality over volume, so any transition would need to be carefully managed." "Understood completely," Robert said. "That's exactly why this approach makes sense for everyone involved. The clients get the specialized expertise they want, Sullivan grows in a controlled manner, and Vertex maintains some relationship through our collaboration agreement rather than losing the clients entirely." After ending the call, I sat at my desk considering the implications. Vertex wasn't just acknowledging Sullivan as a competitor now. They were actively recognizing our specialized value proposition and adjusting their strategy accordingly. It represented a significant shift in the industry dynamics, a recognition that healthcare security couldn't be treated as a generic IT service to be provided by the lowest-cost vendor. I shared the news with the team during our afternoon meeting, seeking their input on how to approach these potential client acquisitions. "We need to be careful about growing too quickly," Aisha cautioned. "Even with the new hires starting next week, we're already stretching our resources with current implementations." "Agreed," Stephanie nodded. "But Northeast Regional has one of the most complex healthcare networks in Massachusetts. 6 hospitals, with different legacy systems and specialized departments. That's exactly the kind of environment where our approach makes the most difference." "What if we propose a phased transition?" suggested Elaine. "Take on their most critical security functions immediately while gradually assuming responsibility for the full network over 3 to 6 months as our team expands." It was a sensible approach, allowing us to provide immediate value in the areas where specialized expertise mattered most while managing our growth responsibly. "I like that strategy," I agreed. "I'll propose it to Robert when we discuss terms." Wednesday morning brought news of Brian's official reassignment, announced in a Vertex press release that described the move as part of a strategic reorganization to better align leadership expertise with organizational needs. The business media quickly connected the dots to the recent migration failures, with several articles explicitly mentioning Sullivan Security Solutions as the firm founded by a former Vertex security specialist who had been terminated shortly before the disasters. By Wednesday afternoon, our phone was ringing constantly with inquiries from healthcare organizations across New England. The combination of publicized system failures, Brian's demotion, and our growing reputation for specialized expertise had created a perfect storm of industry attention. "We need to hire a dedicated business development manager," Stephanie observed, as we struggled to manage the inquiry volume while maintaining focus on our implementation projects. "Someone who can field these calls, qualify leads, and manage the GIDA initial consultation process." "Already working on it," I replied, showing her a job description I'd drafted that morning. "I'm thinking we need to build out an entire client acquisition team, not just sales, but consultative experts who can properly assess each healthcare organization's specific security needs." Thursday brought a meeting with Robert and Vertex's legal team to discuss the client transfer terms. The conversation was surprisingly straightforward. Vertex would receive a one-time transition fee for each transferred contract, plus a small referral percentage for the first year. In return, they would provide complete access to all documentation, facilitate knowledge transfer from their current teams, and publicly endorse Sullivan as their recommended healthcare security partner. "This is remarkably generous," I noted, after reviewing the terms. "I expected more negotiation on the financial aspects." Robert smiled thinly. "The financial terms are secondary to the strategic imperative. These clients are going to transition to specialized security providers, regardless of our preferences. By facilitating that transition to Sullivan specifically, we preserve some value through our collaboration agreement and avoid further public relations damage from abrupt terminations. A pragmatic approach that acknowledged market realities rather than fighting against them." I found myself respecting Robert's adaptability, despite our complicated history. By Friday afternoon, we had signed transition agreements for both Northeast Regional Medical Center and Bayside Hospital Group. Our team was now scheduled to begin preliminary assessments the following week, with phased implementation to follow based on critical priorities. As we wrapped up our third week as a company, Sullivan Security Solutions had grown to 11 employees, with 4 more starting Monday, 7 major healthcare clients, and a growing reputation as the specialized alternative to generic managed security services. Our office space, initially more than adequate for our small founding team, was already feeling cramped. Stephanie had begun researching larger locations that could accommodate our projected growth while maintaining the collaborative environment we'd established. Friday evening, as the team gathered for our now traditional end-of-week celebration, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 3 weeks. From being escorted from Vertex's building with a box of personal belongings, to leading a rapidly growing security consultancy that was reshaping how healthcare organizations approached their security needs. "I'd like to propose a toast," I said, raising my glass to the team gathered around our conference table. "Not to our success, though that's certainly worth celebrating, but to expertise, to specialized knowledge that doesn't fit neatly into corporate spreadsheets but makes all the difference in creating systems that actually work." "To expertise," they echoed, glasses raised. "And to Sullivan Security Solutions," added Aisha with a grin. "The company that exists because someone didn't recognize its value until it was gone." The weekend passed in a blur of preparation, finalizing onboarding materials for our new hires, reviewing implementation plans for our newest clients, and drafting my keynote address for the Healthcare Information Security Association conference. The industry was at an inflection point, with recent high-profile failures highlighting the dangers of treating specialized security expertise as a generic corporate resource. Monday morning brought our 4 new team members, all experienced, healthcare security specialists from Lakeside who had been displaced by the managed service provider transition. Their enthusiasm was palpable as they toured our office and received their initial assignments. "It feels like coming home," remarked James Chen, a pharmacy systems security expert with 15 years of experience. "Working with people who actually understand why healthcare security is different from standard corporate IT." By midweek, we had begun preliminary assessments at Northeast Regional Medical Center and Bayside Hospital Group, identifying critical vulnerabilities and developing phased implementation plans. The transition from Vertex was proceeding smoothly, with their teams cooperatively sharing documentation and system knowledge, a professional courtesy that reflected well on Robert's leadership despite the competitive dynamics. Thursday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to our office, Dr. Chen from Meridian Healthcare, our first major client after the Vertex termination. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said as I greeted him in our reception area. "I was in Cambridge for a medical conference and wanted to stop by personally." "Not at all," I assured him, leading him to our small conference room. "What brings, you to Sullivan Security today?" "2 things, actually," he replied, setting his briefcase on the table. "First, I wanted to express Meridian's appreciation for your exceptional work during our system transition. The board has authorized me to extend our contract for an additional 2 years at the terms we discussed last week." "That's excellent news," I said, genuinely pleased by this vote of confidence from our first major client. "And the second reason?" Dr. Chen smiled. "I've been nominated to the Healthcare Information Security Association's Executive Committee. After hearing about your upcoming keynote address, I wanted to discuss the possibility of Sullivan developing a specialized security certification program for healthcare organizations. Something that would establish industry standards for what truly constitutes adequate security expertise in healthcare environments. An opportunity to formalize the approach we'd been advocating, to establish criteria that would help healthcare organizations evaluate security providers based on relevant expertise rather than generic IT credentials." "That's an intriguing proposal," I replied. "We've been developing internal training and certification for our team members. Expanding that into an industry-wide standard would align perfectly with our mission." We spent the next hour discussing the potential framework for such a certification, the specialized knowledge areas it would cover, the practical assessments it would require, the ongoing education components it would incorporate. By the time Dr. Chen left, we had outlined a preliminary approach that could revolutionize how healthcare organizations evaluated and selected security providers. The following month passed in a whirlwind of activity. New client implementations, team expansion, office renovations to accommodate our growing staff. By the time the Healthcare Information Security Association conference arrived, Sullivan Security Solutions had grown to 23 employees, serving 12 major healthcare networks across New England. The morning of my keynote address, I stood at the window of my hotel room, looking out at the Boston skyline and reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought me here. 6 weeks ago, I'd been summarily dismissed from Vertex Technologies, told that my specialized expertise was redundant in their streamlined operational model. Today, I was about to address hundreds of healthcare security professionals about the critical importance of that very expertise. The irony wasn't lost on me, but there was no vindictiveness in my perspective, only a clarity about the genuine value of specialized knowledge in an industry where lives literally depended on security. Systems functioning correctly. The conference hall was packed when I took the stage, faces both familiar and unfamiliar looking back at me with expectation. I recognized security directors from major hospitals, IT leaders from healthcare networks, even a few former colleagues from Vertex seated discreetly in the back rows. "Thank you for that kind introduction," I began, settling at the podium. 6 weeks ago, I was fired from my position as lead network security specialist at a major security firm. My role was deemed redundant, my specialized healthcare expertise considered unnecessary in an operational model focused on efficiency over context. A ripple of recognition moved through the audience. The story had become something of an industry legend in the weeks since the migration disaster. 4 days later, hospital networks across Boston experienced catastrophic security failures during a routine platform migration. Patient records became inaccessible. Radiology departments couldn't retrieve imaging files. Pharmacy systems failed to authenticate proper medication dispensing. And emergency departments lost access to critical care protocols. I paused, letting the severity of these failures resonate with an audience that understood their implications for patient care. These weren't generic IT problems requiring generic IT solutions. They were specialized healthcare security issues requiring specialized healthcare security expertise that had been systematically devalued and ultimately discarded, in favor of standardized approaches that looked efficient on spreadsheets but failed catastrophically in real-world healthcare environments. For the next 40 minutes, I outlined the fundamental differences between generic IT security and healthcare-specific security requirements, the unique authentication needs of emergency services, the specialized data protection requirements for patient records, the critical availability demands of clinical systems, the complex compliance framework specific to healthcare. The most dangerous trend in healthcare security today isn't technological, it's organizational, I continued. It's the growing pressure to treat specialized security expertise as an unnecessary expense, to replace contextual knowledge with standardized protocols, to value cost efficiency over operational effectiveness. I shared examples of healthcare, organizations that had successfully prioritized specialized expertise in their security operations, contrasting their outcomes with those that had pursued generic managed service approaches. The differences were stark, measurable, and directly relevant to patient care outcomes. What I'm advocating isn't complicated, I concluded. It's simply this. Recognize that healthcare security is fundamentally different from generic IT security. Value the specialized expertise required to implement it effectively, and understand that the true cost of security isn't measured in operational budgets, but in the reliability of systems that healthcare providers and patients depend on every day. The applause that followed was gratifying, but more meaningful were the conversations afterward. Security directors sharing similar experiences of having their specialized knowledge devalued, hospital administrators acknowledging the dangers of treating healthcare security as a generic IT function, industry leaders discussing the need for formal certification standards that recognized healthcare-specific expertise. As the conference continued, Sullivan Security Solutions became a focal point of industry discussion, not just for our rapid growth and client success stories, but for the fundamental shift in approach we represented. We weren't just providing security services. We were advocating for a fundamental revaluation of specialized expertise in an industry that had increasingly commoditized it. 1 week after the conference, I received an unexpected email from a name I recognized but hadn't heard from directly. Brian Coleman. Jennifer, I've been following Sullivan's rapid growth and industry recognition from my new position in London. The specialized approach you've pioneered is generating discussion even here, where healthcare security faces similar challenges. I wanted to acknowledge something I failed to recognize during our brief professional interaction: the critical value of specialized expertise in security operations. My decision to terminate your position at Vertex was based on corporate metrics that completely missed the contextual knowledge underlying effective security implementations. The consequences of that misjudgment have been significant for Vertex, for our clients, and for my career trajectory. But they've also created space for Sullivan Security Solutions to demonstrate a better model, one that properly values specialized expertise rather than treating it as redundant overhead. Sometimes being undervalued is the catalyst for demonstrating your true worth. I wish you continued success. Brian. The email was unexpected, a rare admission of misjudgment from someone whose career had suffered as a direct result of that error. I appreciated the professional courtesy of the acknowledgement, though I had long since moved beyond any need for validation from Vertex or its leadership. 2 months after Migration Monday, Sullivan Security Solutions had become the recognized leader in healthcare security services across New England. Our team had grown to 34 specialists organized into domain-focused groups: clinical systems, security, patient data protection, regulatory compliance, emergency services authentication, and specialized training. We'd moved into expanded offices in Cambridge, designed specifically to facilitate the collaborative approach that differentiated our services. Our client list included 17 major healthcare networks representing over 70 hospitals and hundreds of affiliated clinics and specialty practices, and most significantly, the industry was changing. Healthcare organizations were increasingly recognizing the critical importance of specialized security expertise, evaluating providers based on healthcare-specific credentials rather than generic IT certifications or cost metrics. The Healthcare Information Security Association had formally endorsed Sullivan's proposed certification framework, establishing it as the industry standard for evaluating healthcare security expertise. Security firms across the country were reorganizing their operations to create specialized healthcare divisions modeled after our approach. Even Vertex Technologies had fundamentally reorganized, abandoning their generic security model in favor of industry-specific divisions with specialized expertise in each sector they served. Robert Coleman had graciously acknowledged Sullivan's influence on this strategic pivot during a recent industry panel where we both spoke. 3 months after Brian Coleman fired me on his first day as Director of IT Operations, I stood at the window of our new executive suite, looking out at the Cambridge skyline as evening settled over the city. The office behind me hummed with the focused energy of specialists collaborating on healthcare security implementations, people whose expertise was properly valued, whose specialized knowledge was recognized as essential rather than redundant. My phone buzzed with a text from Aisha. Just got word that Healthcare Technology Today named Sullivan Security Consultancy of the Year for our transformative approach to healthcare security expertise. Formal announcement tomorrow. Another recognition of what we'd built, not just a successful company, but a new model for how specialized security services should be provided and valued. A model that recognized the fundamental truth that context matters, that expertise isn't generic, that some knowledge can't be standardized into efficiency metrics without losing its essential value. As I turned back to my desk, my eye caught the small framed note that Stephanie had given me the day we signed our 10th client. The best security doesn't prevent access. It ensures the right people have the right access for the right reasons. I smiled at the wisdom in those words, because in the end, Brian Coleman hadn't just fired a security specialist on his first day. He had unwittingly launched a transformation in how an entire industry approached security expertise, a transformation that would benefit healthcare organizations, security professionals, and ultimately patients for years to come. Sometimes being undervalued is indeed the catalyst for demonstrating your true worth. And sometimes, the most valuable security insight is recognizing the expertise that protects what matters most. That evening, as I looked around at the company, we'd built from nothing but specialized knowledge and professional relationships. I felt a profound sense of gratitude rather than vindication. Not for being fired, that had been a genuine misjudgment based on flawed corporate metrics, but for the opportunity that misjudgment had created to build something authentic, something valuable, something that properly recognized the worth of specialized expertise. Brian Coleman had fired me on his first day as director of IT operations. He'd had no idea the system would crash on Monday. But more importantly, he'd had no idea what that crash would create. Not just a new company, but a new standard for how healthcare security should be approached, valued, and implemented. And that transformation would continue long after this particular story faded from industry memory, leaving behind a legacy of expertise properly valued, specialized knowledge properly recognized, and healthcare systems properly secured against the growing threats that targeted them. Because in the end, security isn't about preventing access. It's about ensuring the right access for the right reasons. And sometimes, the most important security insight is recognizing the true value of the expertise that protects what matters most. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.